I started. So where are we in our text?
We're on chapter 16, verse 4.
Chapter 15, verse 4. Can you help us out?
Yeah. Vyapare khityate yastu nimeshon meshayorapi tasya lasya thurinasya sukham nanyasya kasyachit. Happiness belongs to that master idler who feels distressed even at the effort of opening and closing his eyes. It belongs to none else.
So this is poetry. What we're talking about is this idea of kartavya, which literally means obligatory action. The exoteric meaning is if you're a Brahmin, you're supposed to do these particular yajnas in the morning to keep the universe flowing together, etc. Those of us who are Westerners, it's like you're supposed to go to Mass every day, every Sunday. Those kinds of obligatory actions. The deeper meaning is the notion that right here, right now is not okay. It needs to be fixed. There's something wrong with the world. There's something wrong with me. And I have that struggle. Now, the root of it is this. First comes spiritual ignorance about the Shakti. Non-apprehension of myself as Brahman. Then comes Vikshepa Shakti, projecting power. First, Jiva Bhavana, I think I'm a person. And that always feels incomplete. And my mind posits a world separate from me, outside of my consciousness, and all the goodies are there. And I either need to fix the world or need to fix me, and that pushes me into this kartavya, this obligatory action. So what the scripture's talking about here is for the woman or man of knowledge, they don't need to do anything in order to be okay. They let go of regret for the past, worry for the future. They've come into the now, the eternal now. Now, let's nuance this a bit. May I talk a little bit about our conversation before class?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. So Walter is moving to Albuquerque. And in the process, he's bought a house in Albuquerque and he's selling property here. So this was his plan. And then interest rates go up. The people who had purchased his property here in the Bay Area, their financing didn't come through. Oops. Man proposes, but God disposes. Or as the military people say, no battle plan survives contact with the enemy. So the question is, do we get upset about it? There was a course of study that was around in the 70s. I have no idea if people are still doing it. It was called the Course in Miracles. It was supposedly channeled from Jesus. I have no idea if that's true or not. But some of it was good. And they used to have these sayings kind of on little index cards. And the one that stuck with me is this: I'm frightened because I see a meaningless universe. I see a meaningless universe because I'm in competition with God. Meaningless universe. It's not okay. It needs to be different. Kartavya. Why do I feel that? God may be omnipotent, but he's certainly not doing it right, meaning my way. And the belief that getting what I want, that people will do it my way, is an illusion. Just look to your direct experience. So the invitation is to be this supreme idler. The way the Master Jesus phrased it, I of myself do no thing. It is the Father within that doeth the work. Any thoughts on this? Next one.
Idam chitamidam neti dvandve muktam yada manaha dharma dharmartha kamamoksheshu nirapeksham tada bhavet. When the mind is free from such pairs of opposites as this is done and this is not yet done, it becomes indifferent to righteousness, wealth, desire, and liberation.
Yes. So normally when we think of the pairs of opposites, heat and cold, things done, things in the physical realm, pleasure and suffering, sukham and dukkam, that's mental responses to conducive and non-conducive environments. Siddha, asiddha, accomplishment, non-accomplishment, success and failure. But here, things done and not done. So we're dealing with this sense of agency. I, as an ego, am not the doer. Two ways you can look at it. Either I do nothing, it's guna and karma that does the doing, or I do everything, meaning the Lord who is mighty within me does it all. And then we're at peace. And then he gives us a list of things. So let's go through the list one by one. To refresh our memory.
It becomes indifferent to righteousness, wealth, desire, and liberation.
So, righteousness. I did it right, I did it wrong. I was a good person, I screwed up. Now, the Buddhists have a term called the suffering of the second arrow. I talked about this a couple weeks ago. So there's the initial arrow, the suffering I have because of my attachments or identification. That's bad enough. second arrow is, why did I do that? Could I have been such an idiot? Or, oh, I should never have said that. Or I shouldn't have done that. Or why didn't I do this? You know, that one. So we have suffering on top of suffering. So here the scripture is saying, drop it. We did what we did. We do what we do. It's not saying that it's not of value to not be a jerk, but we're all going to make mistakes in the world's eyes. We give up thinking that being righteous or its opposite, unrighteous, touches me. This is just the behavior of the world. Forgive everybody else and forgive yourself and move on. Any thoughts on this one? Now, here's a secret. One of the things that keeps us from being able to live in the now is this regret for the past. No, we cannot change the past, but we can, to a large degree, clean up the past. We can apologize. We can amend our behavior. So if you screamed and yelled at a spouse or a friend or said an unkind thing, and you're having a hard time letting that go, try this. Go to that person and make it right. What I said yesterday was wrong and kind. It was not good. I apologize, and I'm doing my best not to do it again. Ego gets defensive. Ego wants to say, I have a right to act like an asshole. Any thoughts on this? If we commit ourselves to amending our behavior, making amends and apologizing, you will find that your poor behavior starts to diminish because it's so damn humiliating and embarrassing. But in the end, understand, at the human level, we will righteous and honest things. The next idea, righteousness.
Well,
yes. So, easiest way to be free from that is come into the now. Do you have a place to live today? Do you have food? Do you have a roof over your head? God's done his job. You have been taken care of. Many of us have this idea that somehow financial security will free me from fear. I know many of us have lost about 20% of our 401ks or our retirements. A lot of people are very freaked out by it. Let me tell you what money is, first of all. Money is stored energy. It's stored labor. That's all it is. What we do is let it flow. It's an energy. What doesn't work is to be financially constipated. In the Christian scripture, Jesus tells the story of the talents. Talent was a form of money, a coin. So once there was a Lord, and he had 3 servants, and he was going away on a trip. And to one servant, he gave 10 talents, and he said, be productive with them. And that servant invested the money. And when the Lord came back, he said, look, I can't remember the exact story, doubled or tripled your money. He made a lot of money. Second servant, he gave 5 talents to. And that person invested a little more conservatively. And when the Lord came back, he said, look, I've doubled your money. To the third servant, he gave 1 talent. And that dude was afraid. So he went and buried it in the ground. Oh, I forgot the first part of the story. After the first 2 servants are successful, the Lord gives them more to do. Third servant comes and says, I was afraid of losing your money, so I buried it in the ground. Here's your talent. The Lord takes it away from him. And he says, to those who have, even more will be given unto you. And to those who have not, even that which they have, it will be taken from you. Woo! Weird teaching. And the whole idea around money or possessions is we need to deeply understand that there's always enough. How do we do it? Inside, be a sannyasi. Be a renunciate. And be willing to have a generous heart. But if we have a grasping, a clasping, a miserly view of things, even if you've got stuff, you haven't dealt with the fear. Now, there are a couple sources of this mentality. My generation, my parents grew up in the Depression. My mother especially was raised with an idea you hoard things because there's not going to be enough. You got to secure things. The other source of that is frequently immigrant families, because oftentimes young families will come to the US because there's no opportunity back in their home countries. And even though they may be successful here, there's still this poverty mentality. Is this making sense? Yes. You certainly find it in whether it's immigrant or not, but in Hispanic families, hard-working people, but oftentimes a lot of fear. Yes, a lot of fear. So the spiritual principle, first of all, understand what is it that the Lord promises us. as long as we don't get super crazy on drugs and alcohol, crime and stuff like that. For living a reasonably good life, you will be taken care of. So the invitation is freedom from fear. The self in you is never touched. It's all going to be okay. And more stuff just makes you have more stuff. In and of itself, it will not make you happy. Any thoughts on this before we go on?
I really liked the story and the word that was used for many, like talents.
Of course, it can be the gifts we have to be an artist, a dancer, whatever it is. Yes. The other thing to understand, if we're using that talent in the coincidental use of it, always understand the end is the means in a different form. So I have a student, and at one time he was thinking, well, I'm just going to continue to be an administrator until I save up enough money, and then I can be the artist that I want to be. And I said to him, not going to work. If you spend 20 years as an administrator, at the end of 20 years, you'll be a very good administrator. But you will not be an artist, because the end is the means in a different form. If you want to be an artist, start arting. All right, the third element he said here.
Desire.
Okay. So we have to understand that this is a subtle thing. There is ego-prompted desire. Ego-prompted desire is rooted in this idea, I'll be happy when, it'll be better if, more better if. Right? That is rooted in ignorance and is painful. But there's a kind of desire that is not an impediment to realization. The technical term we use is subesha, auspicious desire. One meaning is our desire for liberation, our desire to know the truth, our desire to meditate, our desire to study scripture, our desire to do sadhana. Those are all auspicious desires. But there's also a kind of desire that's rooted in expression and giving of ourselves into the world. This has to be a couple years ago now. I was crossing the street right downstairs, crossed Grand Avenue. And there was a mother, two kids, and one was about 4, I think. This little girl. And as they're crossing the street, she just couldn't help herself. She jumped up and down and twirled around like she was dancing and ran to the other side of the street. That's desire and work. It wasn't ego prompted. Watching a 2-year-old or 3-year-old get out the wooden spoons and bang on the bottom of the pots and pans. They're just having a ball. Or I watch YouTubes of baby animals. to watch a baby chimpanzee play with a cardboard box, just having a wonderful time, pulling it over its head and crawling in and out, or like peekaboo with a blanket. This is work which is prompted by desire, but it's not ego prompted. It's just fun. That's how we are designed to live. Master Jesus said, I have come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. There are those of us who are drawn to a life of simplicity, withdrawal from the helter-skelter of life. Swami Tapovanam, Chinmaya's guru, lived in a little mud hut, didn't even have a pair of shoes or sandals. Enormous simplicity. And you've got King Janaka, and his prarabdha the karma was to be a king. Most of us are somewhere in the middle. So we live our lives doing the work that's been given us to do. Swamiji would thunder, serve the society. It's not about stupid little you and your needs. You've been given gifts, talents. Your job is to give them away. Now, another paradox. A human being is like a snowflake. It's like a snowflake falling into a lake. Snowflake falls into the lake. What happens to the snowflake? Is it any different than the water of the lake? All snowflakes are water. Yet science tells us that each snowflake is unique. No two snowflakes are alike. So at this moment, the Lord has created Adi. Today. Can't be anybody else they're taking. That's kind of scary because there's no model, no map for you to live up to. But there is a divine idea of you written in your heart. So this is why I say don't try to be spiritual, be authentic. It's very important to understand this distinction between ego prompted desire, craving, and expression. All action under all circumstances is motivated by desire. Let's not be foolish or superstitious. If you take that list of what you were saying, it means okay, all you're supposed to do is just sit in the chair, do nothing. No, that's not how we're designed. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
There's the last bit, liberation.
Oh, yes. I forgot that. So, listen very carefully. In our sadhana, we are invited to be a mumukshu, someone with a burning desire for liberation. Strive hard for liberation. But as we get to the advanced levels of our sadhana, got a secret for you. Your ego never gets there. What happens is we rub the ego. Both bondage and liberation occur to the mind. The self is ever free. What is liberation? It is not the idea that, aha, I've arrived, I know Brahman, everybody touch my feet, I'm going to start charging for satsang. The moment of realization is the scriptures. The Shisha says, Aham Brahmasmi. Not. I'm a realized person. Egos model, often unconsciously. Here's the self, here's the ego. I'm getting there. I'm getting close. I'm getting close. Ah, I've arrived. And what the scriptures are saying, here's the self, here's ego. I want to be realized. Brahman and Brahman alone. Now we have to be careful. Because if you give up your desiration before you have some direct experience about what is your essential nature, you're fooling yourself. What you've done is short circuit your sadhana. You justify your suffering. So this is a teaching for those. If I were to ask you, do you have doubts about your essential nature? When there are times you think you're a person, keep doing tapas. But if you've started to have glimpses, oh, yes, I am that ground of being, witnessing consciousness, that vast, empty space. And strive hard to stay identified. Shankara addresses this in Vivekachudamani, where he says, even after realization of the truth, there exists a strong impression that one is the karta and bhokta, the doer and the experiencer, which is the cause for rebirth. Rebirth here doesn't mean I come back after I die in another body. It means I re-identify. This needs to be conscientiously rooted out. How? Through steady and continuous identification with self. When you get triggered, when you get identified, Ego says resolve the struggle of ego. Yoga says drop it. Let it go. Yeah, but if I do that, I'll never get what I want. That may or may not be true, but you don't need to get what you want. If I drop it, I'll never do anything. Oh, don't worry. At some point, you'll head to the bathroom. You're proud of them. I'll take care of it. Then he goes on to say it is the annihilation of the vasanas here and now that's considered liberation by the wise. These unconscious tendencies, which have as their first power Varana Shakti, rob us of self-experience. Don't try to be a realized person. Remember. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Virakto vishaye dveshta ragi vishaye lupaha graha moksha vihinastu na virakto na raghavan. One who has aversion for sense objects is considered as not sensual, and one who covets them is sensual. But he who does not accept or reject is neither sensual nor not sensual.
Yes. So the person of wisdom is not caught up in the identity. Oh, I need to be very pure and have an aversion for sense objects. And what they usually do inside is, oh, look at that person. They're a sensualist. Or the opposite. Oh, someday I hope to be a yogi, but tonight, sensualist. So the mind of the person of realization is like this. I have news for you. There's no such thing as worldly enjoyment. It doesn't exist. There's a poor little stone that goes through this so frequently. The fool determines that an object is dear, priya, gets proximate to the object, moda. The point of pleasure, desire and object of desire become one. Pramoda. And the fool says, the happiness is there. Which means they're going to want to repeat it. But for the person of wisdom, an object comes close because of the force of the past. Oh, I widget. So you dance with the widget. And at the point of pleasure, you know that's a taste of myself. You know, Swamiji, there's a book that my friend Rudit here wrote. I think it was she who wrote it, called Every Breath of Teaching. And she just tells Swamiji stories in this book. But one of the ones, I don't know if it's in the book, but I can remember so vividly. We were up at Krishnalaya, where we used to have retreats when Swamiji was here with us. And he was out on the lawn and, you know, answering questions, satsang. And he was a diabetic, so he had to really, really watch his sugar intake, but he loved chocolate. So someone brought him a little Hershey's like you get for the kids on Halloween. So he's in the middle of talking about this profound Vedanta. Someone gives him a Hershey's. He takes it. He just stops. He was going to eat a piece of candy. He was going to do nothing else but eat the piece of candy. Totally experience the Brahman that's in chocolate, but no attachment. Then he moves on. So we experience the bliss of the self in a non-mediated form. We have that trick of the yogi to revel in Brahman Samadhi. And then we also experience the self when we're in the world in a mediated form with a medium, with the dance with the objects. With this, there's no craving for objects, nor is there aversion. The objects don't have any power anymore. The only bliss we experience is our self-nature. The objects of the senses are not good, they're not bad, they're not poison, they're void. Only joy they ever deliver is only the bliss of the self. And the only reason I get a mediated experience is just the force of the past maturing. Do you like dark chocolate? Do you like light chocolate? Ronnie, ooh, I want the dark chocolates. I want the dark chocolates. Yeah, I like the light milk chocolates. Any thoughts about this? Don't be afraid. Now again, in the early stages of sadhana, when we have an addictive relationship with the world, we may need to go through a period where we are physically abstinent. There's a space away from the objects, which weakens their power. This is why Paramahansa Yogananda used to say, maybe it was, I can't remember who said it now. Ashrams are for weak premis. A premi is a lover of the Lord. For those of us who are weak, we go to an ashram. What does an ashram do? First and foremost, it insulates us from our habituated objects of desire. Then you have sadhu sangha. You've got the company of fellow travelers, which keep reminding us. Got a schedule puts you in a life of practice. But few of us are in an ashram permanently. At some point you leave and go back to the world. Any thoughts on any of this? All right, next verse.
He upadeyata tavat sansara vitapankuraha spriha jivati yavedve nirvichara rashaspadam. As long as desire, which is the root of the state of non-discrimination, exists, so long there will indeed be the sense of acceptance and aversion, which are the branch and sprout of the tree of samsara.
Yes. So as long as I have craving, then I'm gonna be compelled into obligatory action. And that craving can either be attraction for things, raga, or aversion, dvesha. And it can be, ooh, I love chocolate. Ooh, I love food. That's pretty exoteric. But then, oh, I love it when I'm disciplined to be able to do it every day. Oh, I hate it when I find myself screaming and yelling at my partner. It gets subtler and subtler and subtler. And it's through insight. When the yogi sees not the good or bad of the world, but that it's shunyata. And the mind stays home. Next one.
Pravritto jayate rago nivritto dvesha evahi nirdvando balavat iman evameva vyavastitaha. Activity begets act, and abstention from it generates aversion. The wise man is free from the pairs of opposites, like a child, and it indeed is well established in the self.
Yes. So, ego prompted activity develops attachment, refraining from it develops aversion, non-attachment. But the person of wisdom is like a child. If you watch a 2-year-old playing, they'll be totally engrossed in something. And then what happens when something distracts them? And what happened to what they were playing with before? Forgotten, completely gone. Even to the point, you'll see some mother holding her really youngster, like 1-year-old or 1.5, and the baby's just screaming. And she pulls out her keys and goes dangle, 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 dangle. Just gone. Why is it that it's hard for to remember much of anything that happened before, say, 4 years of age? It leaves no impression. Somebody who said or did something unkind a decade ago, oh boy, I'll never forget how awful they are. So the Master Jesus said, suffer little children for them is the kingdom of heaven. That's the King James thing. Suffer here means to allow. I always imagined when he was sitting someplace, and there were all the mothers with their kids, and the kids were drawn to Jesus. And the mother's, no, honey, you stay here. No, honey, you stay here. Jesus, no, let him come. Let him come. So much used to do that all the time. Loved children. When Vishwa was a little girl, teeny tiny, she used to sit on his chest and pull his beard. She has memories of that. But what was Jesus talking about? It isn't that we all become little in the kingdom of heaven. The children are in the now. We want to have regained innocence. Live with that immediacy. A sense of awe and wonder. You just look at a child's face. So oftentimes you just look and they're just, the sense of wonder and awe because everything is so new. That's still available to me. Whereas most of us, we're walking in the beauty of nature and we don't even see it because we're so in our heads. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Atumishchati sansaram ragi dukkha jihasaya vitaragi hinir dukkham dukkha tasminapi na kidyati. One who is attached to the world wants to renounce it in order to avoid its miseries. But one without attachment is free from sorrow and does not feel miserable even in the world.
Yes. So there is a state that some of us can get to where we have let go of most of our attachments, but we don't realize we've hung on to a lot of aversions. And the way it manifests itself is, oh, I can't wait to be liberated so I don't have to come back to this horrible world. Or a longing for death. This is ultimately the driving power of people who become addicts and alcohol. It's a way to numb out the underlying suffering, discontent, restlessness. I want to self-soothe. I just think that's the creepiest expression you can imagine. That's what the psychotherapists call. Did you get that term in your psychological studies?
Yeah.
Oh, it's just creepy. But anyway, the whole point is we want to live with death on one shoulder. Live today as if you're going to die tomorrow. There's someone you're not speaking to. Are there misunderstandings or hurt feelings? Clean it up. Live as if you were going to die. Now, if you were going to die soon, don't postpone your life. Oh, I've always wanted to see the Egyptian pyramids. Why not go? This is not a rehearsal. This is your life. I always think of the kinds of dreams that people have on pools. There you are talking to someone and you're loaded, one of these days I'm gonna blah, 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 blah. But do you and I live that way? Back in the 80s, my roommate and dear friend, Perry George, was diagnosed with AIDS. And he said he learned a great lesson from it. It was such an important lesson that if he didn't learn the lesson and lived a long time, he would rather have learned the lesson and died in a short time, which is what happened. He quit postponing his life. He took risks. He dove deep into life. It's nothing like a terminal diagnosis to make you feel really alive. It's very paradoxical. He went on the cruise he always wanted to go on. He did the song recital. He always said, one of these days I'm going to do it. Finally recovered the goddamn chairs. And we live with physical immortality on the other shoulder. What if you're going to be in the body for the rest of eternity? This is it. It's never going to be how are you going to live? Well, F them if they can't take a joke. What are you going to experience if you're going to be in the body for the rest of eternity? Everything will pass away. Everything will change. All of the snowflakes melt. We just watch. So we have to live in that paradoxical place. We're willing to die at any moment, and we're willing to be in the body for the rest of eternity. This is why it's called being Jivan Mukta, liberated while alive. The person of realization is not saying, oh, I'm going to be so disciplined and do all this yoga. Then after I die, I won't have to come back, or I'm going to go to heaven. No, it's freedom here, now, in this very body. And again, the Master Jesus said the same stuff. The kingdom of heaven is at hand, yet in my flesh shall I see God. I think the prophet Isaiah says that. You don't have to leave the body in order to be free. How many more verses in this chapter?
3.
Okay, I think we can finish it. Next one.
Yasya bhimano mokshati dehe api mamta tatha na cha jnani na va yogi kevalam dukha bhagaso. He who has an ego sense even towards liberation, and he who considers even his body as his own, he is neither a jnani nor a yogin. He is merely a sufferer of misery.
If I think I'm a person, I'm deluded. If I have jiva bhavana, that's the term that Gaudapada uses in Mandukya. That's the term Shankara will use. We have to understand some scriptures talk about a jivatman, an individual soul. And we want to realize the paramatman, the supreme self. There is no individual soul. Who sees the phone? I do. That's yourself. It's the only self you will ever be. My problem is attitudes about that, feelings about that are illusory. Investigate your direct experience of the self. The only self you've got, it's you. So if you think you're a terrible person, you're deluded. If you think you're a virtuous person, you're deluded. If you think you're a person in ignorance, you're deluded. If you think you're a realized person, two kinds of people in the world. Those who think they're a person, they are deluded. And those rare souls who know aham brahmasmi. That self is already free. That self already knows itself. How do you know you? I don't know what you do. Yeah. You don't see, hear, taste, touch, or smell yourself. You don't emote yourself. You don't think yourself. You know you are. There is no other knowledge of the self other than that. Guess what? You already have it. Instrument for the knowing of the self is the self itself. That's why I'm blue. And it's perfect. When we say it's real, one of the definitions of real is nitya, eternal, which means you do not gain it. You realize that you've always had it. Okay. Next verse.
Haro yadyupadeshtate hari kamala jyotiva tathapi na tava swasthyam sarva vismaranadrite. Even if Shiva, Vishnu, or the lotus-born creator Brahma be your instructor, yet unless you forget all, you cannot achieve abidance in the self.
So it's not that I'm going to get it. I'm going to get it. I'm going to get it. Some of us want to grab an experience. In Gita, Krishna says, he who knows, knows it not. He who knows it not, knows it. When we fundamentally quit believing the mind itself, I cannot think a real thought. including the thought I just thought. Names. The last verse in this chapter.
Oh, that was the last one.
Oh, that was.
Yes.
That's a good place to stop. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vishishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Namaha. Hari Om. Om Tat Sat. Thank you all.
Thank you.